Hey there, I'm Anthony Romano, and I'm going to tell you in this video how to know if you're fat adapted on a ketogenic diet. So, a lot of people say you have to measure a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm a big believer that you don't have to get tedious with it and measure everything. So I'm going to tell you some ways to know based off of how you feel, in addition to also telling you all the different things you could measure to figure things out. So, a lot of people want to know how to tell if you're fat adapted. And a lot of the gurus are going to tell you to measure this, to measure that, to measure your blood ketones, to measure your blood sugar, to measure your breath, to piss on a stick. That's what people are going to tell you. But you don't have to do any of that, okay? I'm going to tell you how to know and some other tests you could run on yourself in a certain way to get answers. But I'm also going to tell you how to measure things properly if you really want to get like super biohacky about it. So, for starters, click like and follow my Instagram and click the notification bell here, okay? And go to my website after if you want help individually or some of my programs, some other merchandise we got, okay? So, let's get into this now. So the first thing I want to put out here is that a lot of measuring for newbies is dumb, okay? There's a difference between ketosis and fat adaptation. Fat adaptation is when your body is able to use fat effortlessly, basically, to create ATP. So, energy. So, what happens is, when you're in the ketogenic state, right, you might not be fat adapted, and when you're fat adapted, you might not actually be in the ketogenic state in that particular moment. So, example, if I have a carb meal, right, somebody who's been doing keto for 8 years is going to be pretty fat adapted. So, even though my body might not be in the ketogenic state at that particular time, right after having a carb meal and a blood sugar spike and a blood insulin rise, what's going to happen is my body will still maintain that grand overarching metabolic flexibility. So I'll still maintain my fat adapted capabilities. I just won't be in the ketogenic state at that particular moment. So once that all settles, I'm going to be able to make fuel through fat again. Okay, now for people who are in the beginning stage of ketosis, so less than a month, they're going to be in ketosis, then they will notice benefits. But they're not going to have as much room for wiggling around, okay? They're going to have to be very tight with carbs. They're going to have to keep the fruits out of there, okay? I have videos on this all the time. Keep the fruits out of there if you're new. Don't do carb inclusion until at least 4 to 8 weeks after a strict keto diet. Okay, from there, your body's going to give you much more leeway. You can have a little bit more carbs, okay? Things like this, and more variety. It's just that you have to get the training wheels going first, okay? You can't just start riding when you've never used the training wheels, okay? I'm not going to go through that analogy any further because it's kind of a silly one, but you get the point. So, measuring is silly, but what you're going to notice when you are fat adapted is, of course, the initial benefits that you might get through ketosis, but you're also going to notice just overall better energy, better focus, less appetite, and here's the kicker, even when you have carbs, you're going to rebound better. So you're not going to have the typical, before doing keto dieting, if you had a carb meal, you'd probably notice the up and down and the fatigue and the hunger and the bloating. That will be noticeably reduced when you are fat adapted because your body gets better at using carbs as well. So it's kind of a complicated thing, but let's get into, as far as you noticing those benefits, of course they seem on the face, right? It seems pretty on the nose to say, okay, well, I'm less hungry already. Am I going to be even less hungry, right? Here's where the tests come in. Okay, the tests come in once you've done 4 to 8 weeks of keto dieting. You can start doing strategic carb inclusion. So I have videos on targeted keto. I have videos on carb backloading, which is my favorite method. And basically, you're going to start off light with those because a lot of people will tell you that you can't eat carbs again. It's complete bullshit, okay? You can eat carbs after doing a keto phase. It's just that you want to keep keto as your baseline, and then as you continuously get your body used to having carbs whenever you feel like it, that is when your body is going to be much more fat adapted. That's the second level of fat adaptation, is when you're able to use carbs whenever you want and you're fat adapted as your baseline. Okay, so hopefully that's easier for you to understand there, because the main determiner of when you're fat adapted is when you aren't asking if you're fat adapted. So when you're fat adapted, it's basically the point where you don't crave carbs anymore completely and you could be going out to a social event and you look at a box of donuts like it's plastic, that is when you're fat adapted. That's the easiest way for me to tell you as far as a test you could run mentally. Okay, now if we're talking about actual blood markers, okay? So the most practical way to do this is either get a blood test before you start a keto diet and then compare with one after a few months, or you look at one from a year ago, a blood test that you might have had, whatever recently you had, and then compare it after a few months into keto. Here's what you're going to notice. So people will often tell you, okay, ketones, look at your ketones, right? Like I said, the basic paradigm a lot of keto gurus have is that your ketones are going to go up. They're not. Your ketones are going to go down. Reduced ketones is actually a better sign of fat usage, because what actually happens is once you're fat adapted, around 75% of the ketones you make actually go to your brain. And the other 25% of your brain's needs are made from glucose, maybe less depending on, how much your body needs, but it's going to make its own glucose and it's going to use ketones mostly for the brain. The rest of your body is going to be fueled by fatty acids. So, yeah, some ketones will be there, but essentially the ketones that were originally fueling your entire body the first month are actually just going to your brain now. Okay, that's one of the key determiners or key differences of fat adaptation, is that your body literally becomes adapted to fatty acids as fuel, okay? So when we're looking at the ketones and the measuring of the ketones, they're going to go down. So if you measured my ketones after 8 years of keto dieting, and when I wake up in the morning, they probably wouldn't be too high. It'd probably be less than 1 millimolar per deciliter. But here's the thing. I'm not throwing these terms around to make you think you have to start measuring things, because you don't, and it's tedious, and I think it's just not mostly a money grab, because some of them are very useful. But it's just that the insinuation that you have to do it in the first month of keto is ridiculous, okay? So, or at least it's just a luxury, okay? So, just so you understand the millimolars thing I'm talking about here. The state of ketosis, right, metabolic nutritional ketosis, is determined between 0.5 millimoles of ketones in your blood per deciliter of blood. So 0.5, just here's the range you have to know as far as units. 0.5 to, will end up, but between 0.5 and 3.0 is generally the nutritional range, okay? You can get past that and up to 5 or 6 or 7 millimoles per deciliter of blood when you're fasting outright, but anything over 0.5 millimoles is considered nutritional ketosis. So for me, I probably wouldn't be over 1. I probably wouldn't be over 1 in the mornings, but there's some other, considerations here. So when we're going to other ways to measure, so your ketones are going to go down. So if the first month you might register 3.0, right? That's what you might be getting, or at least whatever method of choice you're using is indicating that, right? Whether it's the sticks, whether it's the saliva, whether it's blood, breath, piss, shit. I'm just kidding. That's actually not a way to measure. But so with measuring, right? What's going to happen is you're going to see high numbers, and then eventually that's going to go down because your body isn't wasting as many ketones. That's actually a good sign that you're not keto adapted, is that you have very high ketones, regardless of what way you measure. Because in the beginning, that's really when you should have high ketones. If you've been doing keto for 2-3 months and you're still having high ketones, that's one indication, maybe I'm not as fat adapted yet. But here's the other thing. It might actually be more useful to measure blood glucose, right, with the blood glucometer, right, which is what diabetics use. There's also the continuous blood glucose things people stick in their arms. You can do that too, and that would probably be the most practical way because those aren't too expensive. In fact, that would be the most practical way, I'd say, to keep on top of things, because you could see your blood glucose reactions to everything you do in the day. I haven't used one of those personally yet, but I'm very familiar with them and how they work. So if we're talking about other markers for you to measure, people are going to tell you, look at your fasting blood glucose. People are going to tell you, look at your ketone levels. That's the main ones. Even if it's not your fasting blood glucose, you could also measure your reactions to sugar and blood sugar reactions after food. But that's not so practical, and you'd actually be better off getting a blood test and looking at your hemoglobin A1C, so your HbA1c or fructosamine. Basically, those are markers of glycated sugar in your bloodstream. So it's basically a marker of how much your body's reliant on sugar in the grand scheme of things, okay? So when we're looking at HbA1c or fructosamine, those are possible. Most of the time, most tests will do a HbA1c test, basically how much glycated sugar is attached to hemoglobin in your blood. So that's one way to know on a grand scale how much you're reliant on sugar. So that is important because you have to look at these measurements in context of one another. So let's say somebody wakes up with a little bit over average blood sugar, right? I probably wake up with a decent blood sugar, like not anything particularly low. And the reason I'm not saying exact numbers is because everybody's subjective blood sugar number is going to be different. So that's why I'm kind of framing this in the context of measure it before, or look at an old blood test and then measure after, or get a continuous blood glucose monitor. Maybe I'll even link one in the Amazon. But anyways, so when we're looking at HbA1c, and then you also look at your blood sugar, right? Your fasting blood sugar. For athletic individuals, their body is more adapted to both fuels. So if I wake up in the morning, my blood sugar is probably going to be a little bit higher, and my ketones are still going to be there. Okay, everybody makes ketones while they're asleep, by the way. Little side note. So regardless of how they eat, my ketones are going to be higher than the average bear when I'm waking up, and so is my blood sugar, because I'm an athletic person and I do I'm very fat adapted. So another thing to do is that blood sugar marking might not be as useful unless you interpret it in relation to HbA1c. So if your hemoglobin A1c is low and your blood sugar in the morning is high, that would generally mean you're probably somebody who is athletic. And if you saw a low HbA1c, high blood sugar in the morning, or moderate blood sugar in the morning, that could be an indicator of decent fat adaptation, right? Because you're able to use sugar without being reliant on it. Now, the other way you can interpret this is low triglycerides in your blood. So people who are very dependent on sugar, basically there's high triglyceride in the blood because their body's not actually using that triglyceride. And basically when you have carbs and fats in the same meal, your blood sugar and your triglycerides are going to rise. So for a lot of people who have, cardiovascular issues, cholesterol issues, it's best to look at the triglycerides in the context of the other two markers. So when we're looking at if somebody's fat adapted, their triglycerides should be lower, okay? Can't say exactly what right now because I don't know you, but when we're talking about in assessing whether or not you're fat adapted, if your triglyceride isn't sky high, that's obviously going to be a better indication. So again, if you have a test beforehand and then you measure afterwards and you see a reduction in triglyceride, that's going to mean that your body is less, leaving triglycerides out of the party, okay, and actually using them for an energy purpose. So hopefully that makes sense, right? So as you know, the main primary marker of being able to figure this out yourself is when you stop giving a shit about carbs is when you're fat adapted, and then from there, you can start incorporating them again in light carb backloading and targeted keto manners. Excuse my dog. Light targeted keto and light carb backloading techniques, and then basically after that point you can start scaling that up a bit after your body gets better at digesting them. Okay, use the digestive enzyme for those things, and basically after you've gotten your body more used to this, and after you've gotten your body more used to training in a low carb state, and after you've gotten your body more used to training in a carb upped state, right? Jumping in and out of the two is what gives you the ultimate flexibility. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that you can't do keto for a year. I mean, I've had entire years where I've done basically keto. Like, I've done full year no carb at all. I've done that before. And just because I've been doing it for 8 years doesn't mean every single day I didn't have carbs. But carbs are not necessarily a problem. They're just a luxury fuel. And if you think about our metabolism, it's seasonal. Okay, just like everything else in the world, you have winter, summer, okay? Fat-fueled metabolism during the winter, right? Because carbs don't grow. Name one carb that grows unless you lived in Hawaii and, stored some rotten fruit. That's it, okay? So our metabolism is meant to jump in and out, and that's what gives us the ultimate flexibility, which is going to be a great metabolic health enhancer for you. Okay, so this video was a little bit longer than it should have been, but I really tried to give you every piece of the tools you could have used here. So like this video, and hopefully you have a very clear understanding of fat adaptation now and how to amp it up, because don't forget, the next level, the transcending of fat adaptation, is where you start including carbs here and there, okay? It doesn't mean that you have to have them every week, doesn't mean you have to have them every month. Just example, you're going to get to a point where you're shredded. That's what it's going to be. And you're going to feel good, you're going to feel energy, you're going to feel amazing. And then you're going to just treat carbs like a luxury. Like, oh yeah, hey, you know what? It's my birthday today. Oh, hey, it's, this event this week, right? You go out, you treat yourself, because you've already built up that carb digestibility, like basically the gut bacteria to continue keeping digestive smoothness with carbs, because you're not going to lose that. But example, if you do like a year of keto and then you try to have a large amount of carbs, you're going to feel sick. Okay, it's just common sense. It's the same thing with if people try to get into keto right from the bat, they have a hard time digesting fats. Okay, so, and actually the body will down-regulate its production of bile, which can actually cause a lot of gallbladder issues for people. So it's anything in excess can down-regulate the opposite. So anyways, enough theoretical yin and yang philosophical discussion here. That is it for this video. Like it, subscribe to me right now, and go to my website for help. Thank you so much for all the support. Anthony Romano, peace.